starting now, 8:45 Pacific time, all the way through 10:10 a.m. And then of course we'll start our broadcast day as we normally do. We have a packed day today with several CUBE alum from previous Stratas and other conferences that you may know, and we've also got quite a few new guests. So we'll talk more about that a little bit before we start the show. John Furrier, Dave Vellante, of course, will be hosting for majority of the day. Jeff Kelly, Dave Floyer will be jumping in at various times. But right now, we're going to go live to the keynote feed already in progress here at StrataConf 2013, O'Reilly Strata. So just keep it tuned here all day on SiliconANGLE TV's theCUBE, live from Strata Conference 2013.
Sexy problems kind of blowing up all the media interest. But if you look around the expo hall, everybody's getting to work. Everybody is solving the hard problems. They're not always the sexy problems. But that said, as a community of users, of vendors, we need to look to make sure that we're really not missing the boat here with big data. Let's not be incrementalist. Whatever gets launched, you can bet your bottom dollar, whatever gets launched this week at Strata, next Strata, someone will have something 10 times faster or 100 times faster. In fact, I kind of joked on Twitter that somebody should data mine the press announcements for things that are 100 times faster than the other thing that came before. But you know what? Just getting faster isn't good enough. We're really about providing value to users, about enabling people to be involved in using data in a smart and agile way. So if I've got one thing to say to people building tools, it's up your game. It's not good enough just to be 10 times faster. That's boring. We're looking to enable people to do their jobs. And that is a lot of what we've tried to build into the schedule this year at Strata, looking at providing value, not just incremental over how things were in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is certainly this event has been conflated with the term big data, but we firmly believe that Strata is about a much broader view of the world. There was a great session yesterday in the Data Driven Business Day entitled Data is Not a Business Model, and I think that really underscores it, that you need this trifecta of data and ubiquitous computing and new interfaces for collection and distribution of information. I find the things we cover here fascinating because they're really where the rubber of humanity meets the road of technology. The fact that we have tracks on what it's like to be a connected society, or the need for design, or the legal and ethical issues of a world in which everybody knows everything about everybody else. Those are pretty hairy issues, and they're really the future of human society in many ways. So we love marinating in the creativity that's going on there. As Ed said, this event has grown by leaps and bounds. We are sold out here, and that's Fire Marshal sold out. So you may have noticed the building that we're building across the street for next year. We may have to loan that out to some local teams on the off time to make sure that it gets proper use.
Thanks, Alistair. So as you go through the show today, please rate the sessions. That's a great help for everybody who's put such hard work into preparing their talks, and to us as organizers. That's on the conference website. There's a rating box in the upper right corner of any session detail page. There's also the ability to rate the sessions via the very handy mobile app.
So, they do. Software really has no choice but to do so. Video games are a bit of an exception. Every player leaves a digital breadcrumb trail behind them as they play a game. And our next speaker is the first CTO of one of the world's biggest gaming companies. I think the fact that he's the first CTO at this company speaks volumes about where that industry is headed. So I'd like to welcome out Rajat Taneja to talk to us about the biggest big data challenge of the moment.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here and talk to you a little bit about big data and video games and the challenges and opportunities that presents. Let me begin with a simple statement of fact. Over the last decade, our industry has grown dramatically from about 200 million consumers to more billion consumers. When companies ship packaged product goods and not have a relationship with their consumers, now gaming is being consumed in an always-on, always connected, multi-device, social manner. So that changes everything. We are now being able to collect so much of insight on the game itself, the gameplay, and the gamer, that we have to rethink all our fundamental assumptions of the past. A game like Battlefield, for example, now, on a typical day, generates over 1 terabytes of data from all the telemetry we have about how the game is being played, how the consumers are enjoying it, how they are moving through various levels, what they're doing with the various challenges. A game like The Simpsons Tapped Out, which is a recent huge hit from Electronic Arts, is generating over 150 gigabytes of data daily. We have 120 events now that this game is instrumented for, which is more than double what a Battlefield is currently instrumented for. So the amount of data and insight that we can get about games is changing constantly. More consumers have more devices. They are constantly playing the game in bite-sized increments. There's a persistence to the gameplay, and that's giving us a lot more information on what's going on. This is an example of a heat map of one level of one gameplay, and that tells us how the consumers are proceeding through that game and if the game is doing what it was intended to do at that level. And depending on what happens from this level, the live content can be generated to make the game more personalized for the gamer and help them move through the level if there are some unexpected challenges we are encountering. So games are big data now. In a typical month, we host and we manage over 2.5 billion sessions, which equates to nearly 50 billion minutes of total gameplay. The size of the registered database of gamers just at Electronic Arts is bigger than the population of most countries. And what that means is the amount of data that we are able to generate is growing astronomically. And what's causing this surge? I showed you some examples about data that we are collecting about gameplay. But because business models are also changing and games are going from paid in the beginning to free to play in many cases, there's a lot more instrumentation and insight that we can collect from the game about what's happening with the monetization, what's happening with the behavior with ads, what's happening when you put a real-time update of content like a Madden score up into the game. How do the consumers react? Do they engage more? Do they engage less? Do they hit the back button? Do they purchase something? And are we making the game much more fun and entertaining for them with what we are doing in operating the game as a live service? Timestamps, microtransactions, what's happening with payments, and how they're connecting with their friends. These are all now generating instrumentation and data, along with the game itself, which were some of the examples I showed you earlier. So like many of you out there, the architecture that we had in the way we collected, processed, analyzed the data was very typical of most companies. We had pipes that were built custom for each game type. We had eventing architectures that were based on ETLs and traditional data warehouses. And there was a latency from when the data was collected to when it could be used, or typically from a 1 day, sometimes 2 or 3 days. And the data we got, the insight we got, were mostly descriptive. What happened? And there wasn't a lot you could do with the data. And there wasn't much you could do with getting a full view of gaming in the way it's being consumed across these endpoints, across these devices. So about a year ago, we sat back and said, how do we rethink fundamentally the architectures for the future? And how do we begin to gain tremendous insight that will make the game a lot more entertaining and fun for our gamers by knowing how they're actually playing, how they're consuming, how they're moving through the game? So we adopted 4 principles, which I believe are common principles that help any company. We moved from being a biggest data concept mindset to being the right data. What is the bare minimum data that we need to do what we want to do? So we changed our mindset to go to the right data at the right time. It's much more important to have current data than to have latent data. Secondly, we decided that we had to get economies of scale and had to move from a very big iron scale-up architecture to a scale-out architecture on commodity hardware and move the data quickly through the pipe because the kind of data we were generating was more unstructured and semi-structured data itself, not very big, complicated table and field structure. The more important thing was how do we move from descriptions to predictions about the future? What will happen next, and how can we help the gamer with what's about to happen next versus what happened? And for what happened, we want to know why it happened so we can learn and make proper decisions for the future. In order to do this, there was a huge technical problem we also had to solve to get a single view of the customer through all the different credentials and entry points that they had into our network. So we adopted these 4 principles and began an effort, the most important one of which was the clean and common taxonomy and data policies that allowed us to not take all the 50 terabytes of data a day, but to just take a small fraction of that, store it very smartly, and then run it through the pipe very fast so that action could be taken either in the game, around the game, or even in marketing after the game. The second thing we did was we rebuilt completely from scratch our pipeline in the way we ingest the data, in the way we process the data, and we analyze the data, and we moved from the big iron warehousing architectures to more a traditional architecture for semi-structured data using name-value pairs, and we adopted Hadoop. And from there, we started using MapReduce or adding algorithms, machine learned, adaptive, and predictive algorithms. And where we needed the governed data, we had a thin pipe that allowed us to move the data into our traditional data warehouses. But as a result of this, we were able to get a lot more insight, a lot more actionable data that allows us to do a lot more for our gamers in predicting and understanding what they're doing and how we can do better for them. Propensity modeling, if you will, offer management, customizations, pricing the right catalog, and moving their preferences from one game to the other in the way they have selected those. The glue, the secret to all this, was changing fundamentally how we thought about identity. Separating the notion of an identifier, how does somebody identify themselves when they come into our network, from the back-end platform identity that captures all their events from the phone, from the PC, from the console, from social, into a single persona, and then allows all the data around them to be actioned properly, as opposed to just pipes of data and simple views of the data. So these 4 principles have really helped us at Electronic Arts take a giant leap forward, and it's just the beginning of a very long journey. The main learnings for me, for us, and what I would like to share with you is data is only a means to an end. As long as there is a really good understanding of what the data will be used for and the actions from the data, you can build the right architectures. And it's far more important to have the right data at the right time, because it's a perishable commodity. If you don't use it when you can, you lose the opportunity at the moment to do something really wonderful for the consumer. And the main focus when you look at data has to be, how do you help the consumer, because everything else is a second-order derivative from that and just flows naturally. And the glue for all of this, for us and for many of you, I think, is how do you have a 360-degree view of the consumer across all the interactions with your company, just as we did. I have a little more about what we are doing, and if you'd like to see that, this is a link for it. Thank you very much. It was a delightful experience to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rajat. Now, our next speaker this morning has indeed some history with Strata. I remember sort of meeting him 3 years ago before, well, 3 and a bit years ago before we got all this started, and he was one of the people really urging us at O'Reilly that we needed to do a conference about data. So I'm very happy to welcome him back. These days, he has a lot of fun running product over at EMC Greenplum. Please welcome Scott Yara.
Great. Good morning, everybody. It's really such a pleasure to be here with all of you. That's how we kind of wanted to open this morning, is to just thank you for allowing us to be part of the community. Tim O'Reilly and the folks at O'Reilly have been long-term friends of mine in the company, and I think they've always taught us to really sort of think different. And so instead of sort of a traditional vendor talk, we made some exciting announcements today. But instead of that, we wanted to sort of just give a quick talk and share a few thoughts we had as sort of members, sort of co-conspirators in this data community. And we just wanted to share 3 basic things this morning. Number 1 is we really wanted to take a little bit of time to try and acknowledge this sort of remarkable, extraordinary time that I think all of us find ourselves in. And as part of that, the second thing is to really then look at the amazing people that are transforming this business and ourselves, people that have actually inspired us. And so these are people that are really outside of Greenplum and EMC. And the third is maybe to just put forth a few ideas of what we think is going to be important for us as a community in 2013 and going forward. Just quickly to sort of kick a few things off about myself, just as a little context. As just mentioned, I was the co-founder of a company called Greenplum back in 2000, and I'm still part of the organization today. We got acquired by EMC a little over 2.5 years ago, and we sort of formed the basis of the big data division. And it's really been this very, very rewarding journey and ride. And when we started out, I think we had sort of the same conception about innovation that a lot of entrepreneurs do, that you sort of have an idea, you have some technology you want to build and get a lot of talented people, and at some point down the road, there's going to be clear success. And for those of you guys who know the journey of Greenplum really over the last decade or so, you guys know it's a very different story. And that our path to success was anything but a straight line. And we had a lot of twists and turns and a lot of challenges, mostly a lot of times self-inflicted. But over time, we have found a way to do some things we're very proud of. And so this path to innovation was the result of a lot of hard work and talents from our team and luck. But as I sort of look back to one of the really, sort of remarkable things that we were lucky to be a part of, and I think everyone here is today, is that we're just living in really, really extraordinary times. And that kind of luck, I think you can't just presuppose. One of the favorite quotes I had all the time is from Warren Buffett. They really talked about saying, like, hey, if I was born 1,000 years ago, I would have been eaten by lions and tigers. And Warren was saying, I can't run very fast. I can't jump. And it just turned out that capital allocation turned out to be a valuable skill set when I was born. And I'm so really, really lucky, right? And I really believe that. The time that we are living in together is really, really extraordinary. If you think about the technology vectors that are coming together over the last handful of years, these are things that we've come to take granted for, but the advances in microprocessors, in storage, in networking, in virtualization, these things converging in what some might label the cloud, that's a really big deal. And although we've been talking about mobile for over 10 years now, mobile's reshaping all of this infrastructure, right? It's changing the way we think about all of computing and how sort of citizens connect to these systems. And Marc Andreessen, really, really smart guy, obviously, has had a nice coining and phrasing of a sort of slightly different variation of that, which he says, look, software is eating the world, right? It's reshaping every single industry that we know. We just saw sort of its effect on gaming. All the traditional industries itself, software is eating the world. Sometimes I actually think about this comment and competing in the database industry in the world. Sometimes I actually think Larry Ellison might be eating the world. You guys are laughing a little bit. It's kind of funny. If he's not eating the world, he's certainly eating Hawaiian Islands these days. But the reason why I think that's a sort of significant comment, Mark's comment, is when software is eating the world, that means the world's getting instrumented. And so the reason why, obviously, we're seeing this explosion of data, it's been building for a long time, is because machines are generating all this information, right? And the amazing thing about being here today is watching the evolution of this industry. I think we're all excited to be a part of, and it's been building, right? Wired was one of the first publications to sort of cover this, back in 2008. That was a cover article we were really excited about. When The Economist and Ken came out with this sort of special issue about the data deluge, that was a big deal. Now you really can't turn to a mainstream media publication today that's not talking about this industry that we're in. So getting the world to talk about big data is really, really great. And it's great that I think it's moving, as was talked about before, from a literal definition to more of a symbolic definition. The fact that this sort of concept is on the tips of everybody's tongues around the world is important. The other dynamic in 2013, though, is money is changing hands. We had the first Strata here 2 or 3 years ago, and it was a slightly smaller audience, but you really started to see the emergence of business, and the slide emerged there. But what you saw on that chart, it was a report from McKinsey, is that the big data industry is sort of projected to grow to about $16 billion in 2015. Right? So we're living in a time where real money, real transactions are happening from this industry. It's a really, really big deal. Right? So the second thought we said is, well, we're living in this amazing time. When we were here at the first Strata, we said, well, what do we need from this industry? What would be really helpful to see over the next few years to sort of keep it going? And we put forth a few simple concepts about things that we felt were going to be important. Let's see if I can click that. There we go. And some things that I think, at looking back, we've just made amazing progress in 24 months. The sort of role of data scientists, right? That was going to be a big deal. We wanted government to step in and offer funding and resources and support and investment in these initiatives. Industry, all the big companies in the world and enterprises adopting this technology. In the area that we're really passionate about, Silicon Valley, startups. Lots and lots of startups in this data industry. And when we were looking back at all the progress that had been made over the last several years, what we realized, the one fundamental thing that is consistent is that this is all about people, right? This sort of notion of being part of a community. There are really, really people that are doing amazing things that are well outside of Greenplum and EMC. And we actually asked our team, our data science team and our technical team, to come up with a short list of the people we wanted to highlight that have inspired us to keep doing what we're doing. And we came up with this really, really long list that I can't go over today. It sort of became almost like a hit list of your favorite sport athletes or your favorite bands, and sort of a debate ensued. So I'm going to give an example of just 10 folks that don't work for Greenplum, don't work for EMC, but we really think are doing special things in the world of data today. The first is Jake at DataKind. I don't know if he's here this week, but this notion of bringing data science and combining that with nonprofit organizations and social and civic causes, and sort of bringing data sets together and data science horsepower to solve meaningful problems, really, really inspiring work. The next one is John at Cornell. One of our data scientists called him the algorithm god, right? But he's someone that, as professionals, we look up to because he's been driving research that's probably had more influence on network theory. His HITS algorithm has sort of reshaped how we think about some of these machine learning techniques, really, really, really important things. The White House itself. The big data initiative that was announced, over $200 million in financing and support of big data initiatives and research, funding Michael Franklin's AMP Lab, these kinds of things. The Obama administration taking a really, really proactive stance to make a real difference in the big data community, something that keeps us excited that there are exciting problems to be solved. Andrew and Daphne was another one where obviously sort of coming democracy, Coursera is really, really inspiring. And that was sort of the segue we started seeing, is that the people that we really admired and wanted to work with and had worked with, they're out there creating amazing companies. John saw doing things turn. Joe Hellerstein was one of our closest advisors. He was at Berkeley leading computer science, taking a hiatus to start his own company called Trifacta, about to do really exciting things. I'm sure you guys will be hearing about in the coming years. Ben Werther led his analytics on Hadoop. Part of years ago, we first started in 2000, right, has gone on to Teradata and Yahoo, started his own company last year called Continuity, and I think driving a lot of innovation on where analytics and big data systems go. Mike Driscoll is a deal you worked with to be today. The gentleman who actually built our data science team at Greenplum is now running his own company called Alpine Data Labs, and delivering a lot of breakthroughs as practice, sort of democratizing this and allowing more data science to happen more easily. When you sort of look back, you say, wow, all this is happening as the result of individuals, right? All of us in this room and outside really sort of pushing the industry forward. And that's really, I think, what's necessary. Tim O'Reilly invited me to hear this talk about a legendary technology investor named Bill Janeway, and he wrote a book about doing capitalism in the innovation economy. It really talked about, to say, like, these big, big shifts in humanity. They require these sort of opposite end of the spectrum. They take long-term, sustained, duration investment, really substantiated by the government, to have big technical breakthroughs. And then you need the speculative markets of private equity capital and entrepreneurs to actually bring those to life. And I think we could look back at 2013 and say, wow, we're living in this extraordinary time, and all of these amazing people have the wherewithal to do these things and push the industry forward. And so the last part of the talk then is to really say, okay, you know what, this is exciting. There's still a lot left for us to do, right? What else do we need? And one of the best quotes that I've seen is from Jeff Hammerbacher, and I really love this. It was talking about why he left Facebook to start Cloudera, which has obviously done really terrific things for the world of Hadoop. And he said, look, the best minds of his generation were kind of thinking about how to make people click on ads. Now, clicking on ads is not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, but the really great thing is that in the world of data, we all know there's lots of other really important challenges to go solve. And so this is just a quick list that we pulled from the data science community, from our friends at Data Science Central. And there's 60,000 people that have registered intent to be a part of this community we're all part of. And it's just a quick list of these things that I thought were really funny to share. Data science curious dude, right? A catastrophe risk analyst. I have no idea what that is, but it sounds like it's a good thing. MD. I think this guy just wanted to know that he was an MD, and MDs care about data. Sales amplification consultant. I have no idea what that means. This one I really liked. This is the first time I ever heard this term. A neuroscientist with an eye towards data integration. That's really kind of interesting. A nurse working on solving problems, focusing on HIVs, inspiring stuff, looking at developing countries, right? A Rubyist, a SEMweb enthusiast, data geek currently hacking. Right? The fact that that role could be hand in hand with a hedge fund manager who's here to make money on data is really, really interesting. And in the end, if you look at this, whether it's defense or mid-level or sort of mainstream companies in the middle of the country, we're all big data crunchers, right? We're all here to solve big problems. And that's what I think the sort of last word that I want to leave you with. What do we need in 2013? The word's collaboration. And that's not a pitch for social software or Yammer for the enterprise or these kinds of things. When I talk about collaboration, I mean it almost on the same level as a word as powerful as democracy. It's really hard. Collaboration at this scale we're talking about is really hard. So the first piece is around collaboration around software. That's gotten complicated. Open source software is not the open source of Eric Raymond and Richard Stallman of 20 years ago. Right? You have $100 million investments by venture capitalists expecting $1 billion return out of an open source project. There's going to be lots of conflicts about how that project evolves, right? That's why I think we're going to see the resurgence of standards. Standards ensure compatibility and interoperability. We've gone a long way with HTTP, TCP, IP, and Ethernet. It allows great products to come to rise. Competition is actually a good thing. Collaboration and competition are not in contrast with another. Education, there's so much things. If I look at the content here today and the level of understanding we need across the industry, we're going to need to continue to invest in educating ourselves and the broader sort of constituents out there. And finally, collaboration around data. Lots and lots of collaboration around data. And the reason why I think that's important is this global data set that's going on, my data set, your data set, it's all contributing to this unified data set around the world. And in that data set, I really believe are the insights to some of the biggest world's problems, whether that's healthcare, energy, local economies, the global security, the future of education, the insights and some of the in that just inspire today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. And I think it's a testament to how much Scott has contributed that he actually got up here and talked about how great other people are for a while, which is pretty characteristic. His generosity hasn't stopped there. Greenplum is actually our elite sponsor for sponsoring our lunch today, which will be served in the expo hall. Some of the tables in that lunch area will actually have signs on them that are birds of a feather signs. So if you see a topic, feel free to join that. You can visit the Bird of a Feather sign-up board near registration to sign up if you want to lead one of your own lunchtime discussions. Personalization started at the dawn of the internet. With simple things like preferences and movie recommendations, but the latest draft taken that fix. Eric Colson. Eric.
So the cost of bringing products to market has never been lower. And as a result, we as consumers have an unbelievable amount of choice available to us. which means there's never been a greater need for recommendation engines. These are the algorithms that filter out the irrelevant stuff to help us find the things that we are interested in. And this is important because with all that stuff out there, there's almost a certainty that the perfect thing for you exists and it's just waiting to be discovered. There it goes. Now, one of my favorite examples of this and one of the best recommendation engines is Netflix. They have tens of thousands of movies and TV shows. But they know when I fire up the Netflix app on my smart TV that I want to watch something, not channel surf or browse around for hours on end. So it's their opportunity to present me with the content that I'm most likely to be interested in. And they do a fantastic job. Right here in this top 10 for Eric row is where I usually find that perfect thing for me. So they've effectively narrowed down tens of thousands down to just 10. Now, I've been on the inside at Netflix. I spent 5.5 years working there. And I know how manic these guys are about helping to narrow down the recommendations to help the customer find that perfect thing. In fact, there's a certain product manager there at Netflix, and he would quip, you know, the perfect recommendation engine would narrow this down even further. The perfect algorithm would present the customer with just a single recommendation, the thing they wanted to watch. In fact, at that point, you might as well just play it. Just launch right into the show. Now, that's a bold aspiration. Imagine a company with so much confidence in their algorithms that they could just choose on behalf of the customer. Well, I've since left Netflix and joined a startup that aspires to do exactly this, but not with movies and TV shows, but in a different domain. Apparel. It's called Stitch Fix. The idea is this. We offer apparel items, but unlike traditional e-commerce, the customer doesn't pick out the clothes. That is, we will choose on behalf of the customer and send the merchandise right to their home. They're under no obligation to keep it. We pay shipping both ways. They only pay for the merchandise if they decide they love it and want to keep it. So this is a bold business model. We have to have great confidence that our customers will love what we send them. If we get this wrong, we're going to pay a lot of cost, and more importantly, we'll alienate ourselves from the customer. So how are we doing this? The answer, of course, starts with great data. Consider the data that describes our merchandise. A garment is typically attributed with just a few pieces of information: brand, size, color, price. But there's so much more that describe it. How is it priced relative to peer items? How does it hang on the shoulders? Does it flatter the arms? Is the material wrinkle? Is it edgy? These are things that customers consider. So we have to capture that data to make it available to our algorithms. So we put all of our garments through an encoding process where we capture over 50 attributes of data. It takes all that qualitative information and discretizes it, disambiguates it, creates ordinal attributes, things that are machine readable. And next, we have to do the same thing with our customers. We need to collect data on all the nuances that describe our customers, because clothes are a very personal thing that need to be tailored to very specific taste. And customers trust us, so they provide us with this rich information. Through our style profile, customers provide us with things like height, weight, shape, sizes, brands they like, lifestyle stuff such as their profession and whether or not they have kids. They even provide us with their preferences for taking risks. These are all the things that we need to confidently find them relevant merchandise. And that's the next part. So with all this great merchandise data and all that great customer data, we can do some amazing things. We can find the attributes of the merchandise or the attributes of the customer that matter. Not just matter, but precisely quantify how much value they provide. We can also come up with measures of compatibility between the merchandise and the merchandise and the customer. For example, each piece of merchandise can be described by 8 dimensions of style. Likewise, each customer can be described along those same axes, and that allows us to compute a number of distance formulas between them. We can identify clusters of customers that have similar preferences, and that allows us to apply the learnings from one person to the next. We can introduce parameters that balance how much trendiness can influence the recommendation versus personalization alone. And we can take all that stuff and use machine learning to find the optimal weights and manifest the whole thing as an algorithm that will match that merchandise to the customer. So is that it? An algorithm, and now we're ready to be so bold as to pick out merchandise on behalf of a customer? No, that's not enough. There's still more that we can do. We may max out on the amount of variation we can explain using data and algorithms, but there's still more. But we need to turn to a different resource altogether, something wonderfully complementary to data and algorithms. We employ a small team of human stylists. These are folks that love to help people with their wardrobe, and they have excellent judgment. But what they do not do well is sift through mountains of data. And they don't have to. The algorithm does that for them. The algorithm scales these human stylists by narrowing the results down to them, and then they add value in 3 distinct ways. First, as humans, they have access to additional information. Customers can provide request notes, things they want in their shipments. They also provide links to their Facebook and Pinterest accounts. That provides pictures of them and things they like. So these things say volumes of information about customer preferences, but they're unstructured and indigestible by machines. But to the human stylist, that information is easily extracted. Next, the human stylist provides the benefit of curation. That is, they see the merchandise as a cohesive collection. The algorithm at this point considers each piece only in isolation, and while it may pick out 5 wonderfully relevant things, they may be incongruous when viewed as a set. But the human stylist has a great eye for such things and can adjust accordingly. Lastly, the human stylist is far more capable of fostering a relationship with the customer. The algorithms fall down here. Customers want the confidence and trust they get through human interaction. So we see algorithms and human judgment each play a role. They do very different things. They are complementary to one another. In fact, they are reinforcing. As I mentioned, the stylists don't always take the exact recommendations from the algorithm. They sometimes use the other information available to them. And when they do that, they inject new variation, and that's an opportunity to learn. When their overrides are correct, we can incorporate that learning back into the algorithm. Other times, it's the algorithm that exposes biases and prejudices on the part of the humans. In either case, we learn and we get better. They are reinforcing. Indeed, it's the two together that are the system. Leveraging both sides is important. And to allow them to interact, we provide them with human-computer interfaces so that they can meld their knowledge. And this gestalt that is formed, that is powerful. That gives us the confidence to pick out merchandise on behalf of a customer and send it to them sight unseen. In fact, with this, we prefer to send it sight unseen, because it isn't until the customer gets their hands on the merchandise that you get this. You see, this is what traditional retail and e-commerce are lacking. Often a merchant has that perfect thing for the customer, but it gets lost in a sea of irrelevant noise. Other times the merchant manages to surface it up to the customer, but it gets dismissed without thoughtful consideration. You see, sometimes things can't be evaluated from a web page or even a casual encounter in a store. Sometimes you need to get it into the hands of the customer where they can try it on and see how it looks on them. And when that happens, it's amazing how much things change. We get feedback like this all the time. I saw that thing in the store and I didn't think anything of it, but when you sent it to me, I tried it on and I loved it. You see, this goes well beyond mere convenience. It's not just sparing you a trip to the mall. It's finding you things that you would not have found on your own. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much. So I have brought with me these fine, exciting gizmos. You'll have seen these around the conference venue, and this is part of a project we kicked off last year in New York, which I'm personally very excited about, called the Data Sensing Lab. So these little guys are Arduinos, and they have temperature, audio sensors on them. They have a PIR sensor, so if you walk by, they'll know that you do that. And they're all connected via a little XBee wireless mesh network. And the idea is that we wanted to show really the whole life cycle of data analysis, from acquiring the data through to storing it and then providing visualizations. So I've got a copy of the visualizations on the slide just to bring up and show you. We also have this year added to the wonderful little gizmoid sensors these things called awesome buttons. So if you think a talk was awesome, when you come out of the room, hit the button. And these guys are also connected to the same network. We're recording those. And we're putting all the data together. You can go and see the wonderful team that are doing this work. They're at the back of the expo hall. They'd love to talk to you about the hardware and about the data science that's going into it. and we do make the data publicly available. Also, we now actually just very excited to announce that we put together a book of this whole lab, which is available, I think, as an ebook off O'Reilly.com, and also a wonderful video that we've been tweeting around. So there you go. That's the book of the lab. So if you want to know how to instrument your own home or office to pick up all this wonderful data, go read it. Now, our next speaker this morning was one of the first people really to identify that this Hadoop thing was going to get big, and he worked and built his company doing great things behind the scenes for kind of a year and a half before they burst onto the scene. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming the founder and CEO of MapR Technologies, John Schroeder.
Good morning. Very, very happy to be here, and I hope you're all finding many reasons to hit the awesome button frequently this week. Certainly a lot of exciting announcements, and big data is an exciting place to be. MapR is a technology provider. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology today and what we've seen in Hadoop over the past few years and what we're seeing coming up. The conversation around Hadoop, even 2 or 3 years ago, was very different. It was around what's Hadoop, what is this technology, what sort of use cases can I develop and implement on top of Hadoop, how does it compare and contrast to my legacy applications and other emerging technologies. And it was more of a learning period. And now, MapR has customers ranging from Web 2.0, running one of the largest ad exchanges, to a financial services company who really has re-architected their fraud architecture on top of MapR. And the conversation's changed. Now it's about the need for one platform to handle the broadest set of big data use cases and needs. And some of the problems that we've run into over the last few years is that customers, either due to technical limitations or other reasons, needed to implement a number of data or compute silos. So it might be that they couldn't find a big data technology with a broad enough set of APIs and a combination of batch, interactive, and real-time capabilities to really service the broad set of their use cases. So they had to implement multiple technologies. Or even with companies who have standardized on Hadoop, they may have to implement multiple clusters due to lack of multi-tenancy features. Perhaps, for example, they need to segregate a production application from more of a data exploration or decision support application. So let me tell you where we are and where we're going with that. Hadoop really started as a batch predictive analytics platform. So you'd batch load data into Hadoop, and you deploy, let's say, a clustering algorithm or use a recommendation engine that you just heard about to do a number of very, very important applications. Targeted marketing, trade analytics, fraud analytics, things of that nature. And we continue to see that as being a tremendously valuable use case for Hadoop across industries. But even on our version 1 product, we added a POSIX-compliant data platform. And that changed and opened up Hadoop to a new set of applications as well in a couple of ways. One is it opened up Hadoop to file-based APIs. So it was easy to get integration with other technologies. For example, loading data from Hadoop into a data warehouse, exporting data from a data warehouse into Hadoop, use of desktop tools, integration with Linux servers, and also changed some of the data characteristics from being so batch to being more real-time, so you could do processing of data as written into the cluster. So that was one innovation, and now MapR is working with the community on and there's a really broad range of SQL-based enhancements being done to the Hadoop platform. So of course, Hive's always been an important part of the platform for SQL-based access, but too batch-oriented. So now you're seeing a number of initiatives around interactive SQL and also around full read-write, both from commercial vendors and also from open source projects. We're very excited about a project called Apache Drill, which we think brings that kind of traditional business intelligence data exploration using SQL to Hadoop, and really opens up Hadoop to a broader range of technologists and analysts that really understand how to do data exploration using SQL processing. And there's a number of other implementations being developed as well, and we think that's just good for organizations wanting to use Hadoop. MapR also uniquely did an upgrade to the database component of Hadoop HBase, and by improving the operational characteristics there, we're seeing some really new use cases. In fact, we're working on a telco billing application on top of MapR, and you can imagine 20 years ago, a telco had maybe, you had one phone in your household, you maybe made 100 calls a week. Now with the proliferation of devices, data plans, SMS messages, running a telco billing application on top of HBase, on top of MapR, really makes sense to be able to scale that times 10 at about 1/10 of the cost. And we're not done yet. There's going to be more integration of search, real-time streaming, and really on the quest to really provide a data platform that can service the broadest set of your application needs. I invite you to learn more about MapR. We'd love to partner with you on your big data endeavors and try to make you successful there. Stop by our booth. You could hear about performance world record. We set the minute sort world record with a partner at Google and announced that this week. We're in booth 401, and I'd invite you to stop by, also talk to the group, meet some of our people, and start that partnership on your big data projects. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John. The killer feature of software as a service was continuous delivery. Rather than submitting to the tyranny of the gold master and the long shadow that software cast, companies could publish constantly. Does anybody here remember how much fun it was to upgrade software in their company? Anybody remember how interesting it was to see software companies name their releases by the year it was published? That whole world is gone, and giants like Salesforce and Google and Taleo rode the resulting meltdown of the desktop software industry to growth and profit. The mobile world has changed all of this because it's not just the explosion of device variety or the strictures of the App Store. It's the fact that the best mobile interface is the one that just gets out of your way. Until it's needed, of course, and then it interrupts you gracefully. And that requires context, which is, as Robert Scoble points out, exactly what big data is for. Our next speaker is a senior data scientist at LinkedIn, leading the mobile analytics team there to understand and improve the mobile device experience. Please help me welcome to the stage Yael Garten. Yael?
Good morning. I'd like to start with a quick show of hands. How many of you have used your mobile phone this morning? All right, keep your hands up if you also used your computer, your laptop, your desktop. All right, keep your hands up if you've also used your iPad, and if you've also used your iPad mini or other mini. Okay, pretty amazing though to see that probably a quarter or a fifth of the audience still had their hands up and used 3 devices already, and it's only 9:30 in the morning. So the world is really changing. Your user, the person using your product, is no longer the person sitting at this desk. Let's take a quick look at what it actually does look like. With ubiquitous computing and mobile devices, we have constant access to information and products. And so in a day in the life looks more like this. Wake up in the morning, you roll out of bed, you check your email on your phone, commute to work, maybe on the train, pull out your tablet and read some news, get some updates. Get to work, log onto your desktop or your laptop, maybe pull out your phone while you're on the way to the lunch line, and then later in the day, use your phone for a quick minute when you're on the supermarket line or on your way home. So we are constantly connected, constantly. And this new type of usage, this multi-screen usage, leads to new experiences, new interactions, and new touch points with your products. So how do we ensure that these experiences are really relevant, engaging, seamless, and rich experiences, no matter how, when, and where our users use our products? Strata is about making data work. And today I want to talk specifically about making data work to delight your users. So the mobile space is very complex, and I want to leave you with 3 points today. First, that the mobile space is in fact complex, that it's rich, it's multidimensional, and that we need to recognize this because it is different. The second point is that to simplify, we need to invest in tracking. And the third is that if we do this investment, we can leverage the data to create amazing products that our users will love. So I simplified the picture for you. You might think, well, I'll track phone, tablet, desktop, and I'm good to go, right? Not exactly. Let's take a look at this phone user. This is not actually just a phone. It's specifically an Android phone. And it's not just an Android phone. It's actually a Samsung Galaxy S3, and that matters. There's a lot of variability within that Samsung experience. Screen size, whether they're using app or web, what connectivity they have, what price point, the location that they're in. Everything matters. Because if the goal is to optimize the user's experience, to make it engaging and delightful, then all of these will come into play. And if we don't take these into account, it impacts our understanding of what that experience is at that point in time. So let's take a look at a few examples here. Screen size, why does that matter? Why do we want to track that? So we have phones, tablets, desktops, phablets, which are in between sizes. All of this really matters because it's more than just the screen size. It's actually a completely different form factor and completely different experience that the user engages with. Tablets are generally an infotainment device. Phones are useful for quick updates as you're on the go, fragmented throughout the day. It's very different and it impacts behavior. When you make a decision on what to present to the user on these different screen sizes, you need to know how that panned out for you. And if you want to iterate on that and change, you need to know what screen size they're using. Let's take a look at app version. So when you're about to launch your latest and greatest version on a website, you just push the code to production, right? And you're good. All of your users are experiencing your latest and greatest. Mobile's different. That's not the case. The mobile apps are distributed through the App Store. So you submit to the App Store, you wait a few weeks, it gets approved, and then you have to wait a few days, a few weeks, maybe a few months until all of your users manually grow and upgrade from the App Store. If you want to analyze the impact and understand how users are engaging with your new app, you need to know what app version they're on and not assume that they're all on the same one. What about app or web? When I'm using my mobile device to access your product, I can either do it on the app or I can do it through the browser on the mobile device. Why does that matter? It actually does. It's a very different experience. Generally, the mobile web is transactional, which means that people are driven in from an email that you have sent them. Whereas on the apps, they had a specific intent, a use case, and they wanted to go and launch your app, press on that icon, and use your app to get at some piece of information, some experience. It's usually more engaging and a richer experience, and that'll impact the session that they have and what you see as a result of that. A/B testing. You can A/B test your heart's delight on websites, and we all do that. On apps, it's limited. Let's look at operating systems. We've covered a few dimensions. Let's look at a few more so I can convey to you how complex the space is and why it matters. We have a variety of apps on different operating systems, and that really impacts the behavior of the users. We see very different usage across the different operating systems. And if I take just a simple example that we saw from our own data, when we launched push notifications, we see a significant difference between iOS and Android at the operating system level. To opt into push notifications on iOS, you have to answer a specific question. Do you want to opt in or not? Yes or no? Very simple. On the Android, it's buried in a lot of other questions that are asked at the point of installation. And this small difference causes a 3x difference in the number of people that are opted into the push notifications. So operating system matters. What about location? People often think about location in the context of mobile as the precise location that that person is as they're navigating in a short distance. It's actually much more about context. Context matters. So the region of the world you're in, the smartphone penetration you're in, all of that matters when you think about mobile. For example, what if you designed around a user base that's US-centric, and now I tell you that China has actually surpassed the number of smartphones that are actively used as compared to the US. How does that impact your product design? So hopefully I've conveyed to you that mobile is very complex and that it matters and that it impacts your data and your analytics and that you need to track it. And let's take a look at a few examples of how we can leverage that data and the richness and the heterogeneity in the data now that we're tracking it. When we set out to design our iPad app at LinkedIn, we decided to use data to inform the product design and took a look at how desktops are used to access LinkedIn, basically between 8 to 5, and how tablets are used. Coffee and couch. You see them spike in the morning, and you see them spike in the evening. You're not going to design in the same way knowing that. And now what happens when you looked at how that looks in India? In India, it turns out there is no coffee experience. You don't have a spike in the morning. Maybe people rush off to work and don't have coffee. And then they come in the evening, and they have a longer and later couch experience. And so we designed our app around a rich content consumption and news consumption experience. Again, very different, and very different from phone, which is actually a flat line throughout the course of the day. So all of this matters. Mobile is also a very dynamic space, and you have to follow the trends. So iPad mini launched, and Google launched the Nexus 7. These 7-inch screens are not just a small version of the iPad. They're very different. It would be wrong to think that you should design in the same way. You need to look at these new devices and think about how you're going to design for them. Simple example for this is that when we designed the iPad app, we looked at how people are using, and they use generally in landscape mode. And so you design around that. But what happens when these 7-inch screens come out and people are holding them in portrait mode? Should that impact your design? 40% of emails today are read on a mobile device. It's pretty amazing. By the end of the year, it's projected to surpass 50%, and that'll probably never go back. If you're not optimizing your email, you're losing a huge chunk of your member base. And so tracking this matters and acting upon it. Simple test we did, increase the font size, caused 2x increase in the click-through rates on our emails. It's pretty amazing. If you're tracking this data, you can make decisions and change your products based on it. The data tells us to simplify. So when we launched a new app, we took a very large set of features that people could access and just boiled it down. It's a small screen. Let's give people 4 options. And users loved it. It led to dramatically increased engagement with our mobile apps. And so then what we did is say, okay, well, what learnings can we take and leverage across the different platforms? We learned from phone, we learned from tablet, what can we take? And we applied it to desktop. We launched a simplified version of the desktop experience, and again, led to significantly increased engagement, 70% more visits to the homepage. Mobile is really about opportunity. By the end of 2013, there are going to be more mobile-connected devices than people on the planet. It's a pretty amazing opportunity. It's changing the way the world works. As more and more people start using mobile devices, and more segments of the population really make use of mobile data services, it's becoming an essential part of life. Mobility has proven truly transformational. Both in developing countries and in developed countries, it's becoming a common way of life, and it's really impacting everything we do. If you think about yourself, how you shop, how you connect with people, how you message friends, how you take care of your health care and your bills, everything we do is becoming more and more mobile and becoming more and more mobile first. It's really transformational. And finally, it's about connecting. More and more people and more minutes are spent every day on mobile devices connecting. And it's really connecting you with your network, with your community. It's connecting the pieces of your day. It's connecting you with the tasks that you want to do during the course of your day. So let's make data work to delight users. Let's recognize the complexity in the mobile space and the fact that it is so large and multidimensional and constantly changing. Let's invest in tracking, create the tools to turn this rich, heterogeneous data source into an advantage that we can create amazing experiences through. And then let's leverage the data to create these delightful, seamless, multidimensional, multi-screen experiences for our users. Thank you.
Thanks, Yael. Thank you so much. It was great to see all that good experience and hard data. So one of the things that's kind of a shame about a conference is you see a speaker and you want to ask them a question and there's a line of 10 people trying to talk to them and you run out of time. So what we do here is we have these sessions called office hours. So if you want to catch up with the speaker, maybe talk more in depth with them, if you check the website, we have office hours listed, and many of our speakers have volunteered to sit in the expo hall. There's some tables and chairs around there, a nice cafe area, and make themselves available to meet with you more and talk about their talk or whatever you'd like to talk about. That's happening in both today and tomorrow in the expo hall. Now, one of the areas that everybody feels could benefit a lot from data is that of education. So I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker who's going to talk about just that subject. Please welcome Prasad Ram.
Personalized learning is one of the big promises of online learning and digital learning. And we all know that it has something to do with big data, has a big role to play there. And let's kind of look at other industries that we have already listened to a number of speakers, they've talked about how personalization is a solved problem for them. Since whether you're trying to buy a garment or whether you're trying to watch a movie on Netflix or, Pandora kind of knows the exact song that that I'm interested in listening and is able to kind of suggest that to me. Or Pulse kind of knows the news categories that I care about and recommends the news items within those categories all the time. And Amazon, of course, has made impulse buying a very attractive thing for everyone because it somehow is able to read my mind all the time about what kind of products I'm looking to buy. So all of these industries have adopted big data and kind of implemented personalization in many ways. So let's kind of deconstruct to see what is it they have done, and as a result, what do we need to do to figure out how personalized learning can happen. So step one is they clearly have a user profile. You can kind of, you heard Eric's talk where they capture everything about your body size and shape and your risk averseness or risk profile and so forth for clothing. So they capture user profile, either by asking you for it or by tracking some of the behavior that you exhibit on their sites. Now, the user profile that they capture is not very complete. Netflix doesn't know about the movie I watched on YouTube, or Amazon does not know what I did over the weekend shopping in the malls. But whatever they have a reasonable user profile to start with. Number two is they have a catalog. Since Amazon knows for all the millions of products that they have a perfect catalog. They know all the descriptive information. They know which of these products got returned how many times. Netflix knows, the movies that got paused and people quit watching after 12 minutes and 23 seconds. And so they have created a perfect catalog. And then, of course, the recommendation algorithms. Many of you are good experts at that. And there's a whole variety of them. And at least to get things started, you have the recommendation algorithms. So from a learning perspective, what is lacking? Since every system will have some profile, what is centrally missing here is what we refer to as the learning resource catalog. Learning resource catalog that can kind of capture millions of learning resources on the web and organize all of these resources into a taxonomy so that it can relate every resource to what is the subject, course, unit, topic, lesson, or concept that this resource is likely to teach. Kind of tag all the resources on the web with the perfect metadata. So the metadata, like the descriptive metadata, which is fairly standard in terms of details, description, title, and rights information, and so on, but also metadata about the learning outcome. People who watch this video on atoms and molecules, how did they do on the corresponding quiz? And finally, all the user inputs and usage data that we need to capture and kind of present. So what we'll do is kind of take a 90-second break to watch a short video on one user story about how a teacher would use a learning resource catalog.
Mrs. Johnson is a 6th grade math teacher with 30 students. She has data from test scores and homework assignments, and she can see the different learning needs for each student. Many of her students are weak in this Common Core State Standard, which has to do with understanding ratio concepts. She wants to find high-quality resources on the web to enhance their understanding of ratios, but Mrs. Johnson is at a loss. The resources are vast and scattered, and she doesn't have a way to pinpoint the perfect resources to fill each student's learning need. With a learning resource catalog, we can quickly make sense of the vast amount of resources on the web. The catalog covers all K-12 subjects and is constantly being updated with the latest online learning resources. We can drill down to see millions of resources such as videos, games, and digital textbooks. Mrs. Johnson can look at all the resources available for this Common Core State Standard. The resources are tagged with descriptive data like title, source, and age range. User inputs such as vocabulary, likes, and dislikes. Usage data such as views and time spent studying. And learning outcomes like quiz scores and concept mastery. Now Mrs. Johnson can select the most effective resource for each student. She can copy the link and assign it via email. With millions of education materials on the web, we need a learning resource catalog that organizes and tags them and provides an easy way for teachers to pinpoint resources and personalize learning for their students.
So I kind of want to wrap this up by mentioning that Guru and the Learning Resource Catalog is a core element of SLC in Bloom, and I would love to meet with as many of you at the booth. We have a booth in the exhibit hall, so please come and discuss your issues, challenges, and ideas with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker has been working with the O'Reilly team for years. She's now championing over open government with Code for America, and she's here to draft you. Jennifer?
I want to thank Alistair and Ed for supporting Code for America by having us here, but for a lot of other stuff that they do, and also to Scott Yara from Greenplum, who's been a supporter of ours from the beginning. Real quickly, we call ourselves a Peace Corps for geeks, but instead of sending our geeks off into the developing world, we send them into the wilds of municipal government. We have 28 fellows this year. They are incredibly passionate and talented developers and designers and data scientists and data wranglers. They're taking a year off from their jobs. We pair them in small teams of 3 or 4 people with local governments that are chosen through a competitive process. And they're based on, we have them work in this very structured year based on lean startup principles and design thinking and data-driven decision making. And they build apps. But of course, the apps are really all about data. So here's an example of one that's about data collection. In Philadelphia, they're using this app called Textizen, which they built to get feedback from citizens on the Philadelphia 2035 plan via text message. Here's one that's about data liberation. Our fellows liberated over 836 municipal data sets last year, which is pretty remarkable. It's actually remarkable that we counted that many. They put up open data portals like this one in Santa Cruz. Or data analysis. This is a project where the fellows looked through the search logs of honolulu.gov to figure out what people were really looking for when they came to the site, and then built a simple, beautiful, easy-to-use interface around those needs. And of course, you're probably not surprised, we do a lot of data visualization. So this one is visualizing service request data, so potholes, out street lights, and things like that. Now, these are just a couple of dozen that have been built throughout the year, but the point really is not so much the apps, is that these are really interesting problems to solve. And when you solve them, you make a big difference. You really can have an impact, not just on individuals, but on society at large. So let me explain that through one of the projects we're doing this year. This is Ann Milgram. She was formerly the Attorney General of New Jersey. And she has been teaching me a lot about our criminal justice system and what works and what doesn't work. So, for example, if you are charged with a crime, we as a society have a decision about whether we hold you before you're tried or release you. Now, there's a lot of data that could be brought to bear on that decision, but we don't use that data. They've studied this, and they've found out that the biggest factor in whether you're held or released is whether the judge had lunch that day. And of course, it matters a lot whether you're held, because it turns out that you're 5 times more likely to be convicted of a crime if you're held pre-trial versus if you're released. And I'm sure there are a lot of reasons why that's true, but again, they've studied this, and one of the things is that the jury simply sees you very differently. If you're coming from a jail cell, you look different, you smell different, frankly, you have had a different experience than if you're coming from home. And we think about this thing called bail. Bail is supposed to let the major criminals stay in jail and the petty criminals be released. Turns out if you're held on $500 bail, statistically, you are actually very unlikely to have that $500. And the bail bondsman won't help you. They want to deal with the $50,000 and $500,000 bails. So those guys get out, while the petty criminals are stuck in the system and held. And this is one of the reasons our criminal justice system is completely gummed up with very petty criminals or people who are charged with very minor crimes and are held for very long periods of time. And of course, if you're held, you lose your job, you can't support your family, And in jail, one of the things that happens is people often learn to become criminals. So this is work that matters a lot. Anne knows that we love working with municipal data, so she asked if we could get a couple of cities to implement the risk assessment model that her foundation has developed to try to help some cities make better decisions about pretrial. And I said to her, you know, to be honest, I'm a little scared of this. This seems like a pretty political thing, and I'm not sure it's something we should do. But I sent a note out to the network of cities that follow us and said, does anybody want to try this? And I was shocked. In about a day, I had about 20 cities raising their hands, saying, yes, we want to try. What I didn't know is that pre-trial incarceration is one of the biggest costs to cities, who, of course, are out of money. In some cases, it's the second biggest cost after pensions. So if you can move the needle on getting fewer people held pre-trial safely, even a couple of percentage points, you're not just saving lives, but you're saving an enormous amount of money for city government, which means you're saving taxpayer dollars. So this stuff really matters. We eventually chose 2 cities to work with, Louisville, Kentucky, and New York City, and now there are teams of 3 fellows each in those cities right now, learning everything they can about the criminal justice system. This is Marcin. Until January, he was a developer and designer at Google, but he's decided to do the Code for America year, and he's driving around Louisville with the police department on a ride-along, and he and his colleagues actually got booked into jail. They were held for about 3 hours. They didn't commit any crimes. They just wanted to have that experience to know what it was like for the people they were trying to help, and of course to really see what data is generated through that process and what data could be brought to bear to making better decisions in the future. I should add that these are not typical experiences of Code for America Fellows. We don't send them all to jail. But they do have this wide-ranging kinds of experiences throughout the year that mean that every fellow who's gone through the program has said that he or she had his or her life changed by it, that they would absolutely do it again if they could go back in time. So it's a really fantastic experience. I think it's fitting that we're talking about this here, because Code for America was inspired by this guy, who I think is in the room, who started telling hackers and entrepreneurs, you know, it's really important that you work on stuff that matters. I don't know who Alex Gravely is or why he tweeted this, but he said, who if not we, when if not now? And what I hope it means is that each of you thinks about the fact that I truly believe government can work for the people, by the people, in the 21st century, but it's only going to do that if we make it so. And so I hope that each of you here today finds their own way to make that so. Thanks very much. Oh, there you are.
Thank you, Jen, so much. Thank you, Jen. Now, as we come to our final keynote, it's a perfect circle with where we started off this morning, really talking about how we're only just getting going and how really the acquisition of the technology and the data scientists and so on is just the first step. Now, by means of explanation of how important our next speaker is, I just want to share a little of my history with you. You've probably figured out that I am not entirely American, and in fact, I'm British. Thank you. Now, in England, if somebody is important, you know, they get a lot of titles. So the Prince of Wales is His Highness Prince of Wales, Prince Charles. In Scotland, he's the Duke of Rothesay. In Cornwall, he's the Duke of Cornwall. Our next speaker has the august title, Global Managing Director of Information Technology Research and Executive Research Fellow at the Accenture Institute for High Performance in Chicago. She much preferred that I read that out than she had to, but I think she ought to be called the Duchess of Data in honor of Prince Charles. So please help me welcome Jeannie Harris.
Thanks so much, Alistair. Good morning, everybody. Actually, at some of my clients, they refer to me as the rock star of data, but I have to downgrade that when I'm in this august group. Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today about a topic I am really passionate about, which is what's it really going to take for big organizations to get big value from big data. You know, as I stand here today and I look at all of you, I feel a little bit like it's a homecoming, because this is a topic that I have visited over and over again in my career, both as a consultant and as a researcher. And so As I think about it, though, I can't help getting a sense of thinking back to the very beginning of my career, where I was incredibly fortunate to participate in a research project that was having a series of conversations with Peter Drucker. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Peter Drucker, he is known in business circles as the father of modern management. In fact, Peter Drucker was the first person to really define a business as a series of complex systems, all very interrelated. Peter was a master of understanding and looking at patterns and data. In fact, I think in many ways he would have been very much at home in this group. Because one of the things I learned from Peter Drucker in that time was that it's important to really understand the patterns. Now, Drucker had an amazing life. He knew everyone from Schumpeter to Freud to Jack Welch. And he had this wonderful way of pulling together all of these threads and streams and telling people in very plain language what the art and science of management was really all about. And so I really wanted to share with you a couple of things that I learned from that experience. Now, when I say I worked with Peter Drucker, that's not exactly true. The people I work for had a series of conversations with him while I got coffee and took notes. But I listened really hard, and I learned a few things that I think are significant and will help frame our discussion today. Number one, we do have to seek patterns, because through patterns we can get deep and original insights. Number two, businesses are complex systems, and that means that if you optimize a single element, it rarely creates sustainable value. You have to make sure the whole organization is optimized. The next thing I learned from Drucker was that we need to be patient. He had this wonderful way of talking about how Gutenberg might have been a goldsmith, and that led him to understand how to develop the printing press, which led to 17th century German banking, which led to the invention of the steam engine, industrial revolution, information technology, and here we are today. It all sounded seamless and flawless when he took it, but you know what? I'm no Peter Drucker. I can't do it as well. But the lesson to take away from that is we have to look at the big picture. He once said in an article that it took 50 years for organizations to get information technology and transaction systems right, to really figure out how to get sustainable value out of them. So we need to understand it's going to take some time to realize value from knowledge, information, and data. And the last thing I learned from Drucker that I think is critical to our conversation today is that these things don't happen unless someone is accountable and makes them happen. So his shorthand for that was what gets measured gets done. But what he meant was you need to plan, act, and monitor the outcomes, because if you don't focus on the entire system, nothing's ever really going to change. Now, as I sit in this meeting today, I want to let you know I really do believe that business and big data are meant for each other, and that big data analytics really is a game changer. Back when I was a consultant, we always had these requests from clients. They always wanted to do something that was always just a little bit out in the future. All those barriers of data and technology are finally gone. So I really truly believe this is your moment. The question is, are you ready to seize the day? And here's where I get a little concerned, because every conference I've been to, going all the way back to the mid-1970s, started out with the same kind of large audience, expectations, breakthrough technology. I remember being at a conference in 1980 where they talked about all the data that was going to come down. We were going to have gigabytes of data, people. We were going to be able to someday analyze 1,000 transactions a minute. It was huge big data back then. The numbers have changed, but the storylines haven't changed all that much. Back in the 1990, there was a very popular movie called Field of Dream. Again, in 1990, we had conferences just like this one about data warehouses, this amazing new technology that was going to allow us to transform the way managers made decisions. It was going to change the world. Only you know what? If you build it, they will come, was a great mantra, and every conference speaker used it. If you build it, they will come. What they meant was all you had to do is come up with the cool stuff and get the data, and if you had the right information in the right format at the right time, great things will happen. Well, you know what? I'm a fan of movies and a fan of movie history, and Unfortunately, I think that's the wrong movie. The movie we're in is not Field of Dreams, people. It is Groundhog's Day. We have to learn from the patterns of history. I know this is an industry that doesn't like history that much, but the reality is that we've done a lot of this before. If we don't learn from the experience, if we don't do it differently this time, we're going to miss the moment. And I don't think we can afford to have that happen, because realizing value for business executives, indeed for governments and organizations of all stripes, is absolutely critical, yet it remains elusive to many. And if you don't believe me, this is kind of depressing for me, actually. I first used this slide in 1998. The only words that are different are the ones in blue and red. The reality is, executives know that they're just beginning to tap the potential that's in their data. They know there's a lot of information outside their organization that's useful. The question is, how are they going to do it? In 1998, an oil executive came up to me and said, you know, I think this whole experience, this data deluge, information overload, whatever you want to call it, is a little bit like going to an amusement park. There's a lot of smart kids who are dragging you onto this exciting ride, and they guarantee you there's going to be thrills aplenty. And it is. There's a lot of sharp rises and falls, hairpin turns. You get off, but here's the problem. At the end, you're a little bit queasy, you're a little bit poor, and you've arrived back at almost exactly the same place you were before. So what are we going to do about that? Well, on the business side, the good news is executives understand that having lots of data technology and data scientists is just the data point. They need to make changes as well. And they understand to really unlock that power, the organization has to change as well. But there's one thing that we really have to do as an organization, and that is we have to understand that there's a journey that's bigger than just the people in this room. We have, from a business perspective, the need to take individual insights and turn them into organizational insights, actions, and outcomes. So how do we go from the business issues that matter through the data, analytics, and insights to organizational insights? So it's not enough of a data analyst that knows something. The guy who makes the decisions has to buy in too. That's the first place where we have a gap. Because if there is one barrier, in my opinion, based on decades of research, to the widespread adoption and impact of big data, it's lack of trust. Now, I know when you go and meet with executives in companies, you meet with polite folks, you meet with people who are enthusiastic, but a lot of the decision makers are secretly thinking this. You know what? I know you think you're hot stuff, data scientists, but I'm accountable for business results, and guess what? You don't speak my language, you don't seem to understand me, you don't understand my business, you don't understand what drives success in my industry, and you know what? I just don't trust you or your fancy systems. We've got to find ways to forge trusting, collaborative, and effective working relationships with decision makers. And that means, in addition to all the other things data scientists have to do, they also have to have business acumen, industry knowledge. They have to be able to communicate in the language of business, and they have to actually become a coach to these folks. So there's a lot of things that go into this, not the least of which is what our last speaker mentioned. You have to work on issues that really matter to them. Of course, we're going to need more than just great data scientists. We're going to need great data-driven analytical leaders too. And they are out there. They are not universal, but they are there. And they are passionate advocates of data-driven decisions. But they have to set the tone. The culture of the organization starts with them, which means they have to learn to set examples. They have to make decisions based on data and follow through and make sure that they get results. They have to be willing to challenge people's assumptions, which often might be unjustified. They have to be willing to hire very smart people and let them argue with them. So I think that one of the next big challenges is we have to develop a cadre of analytical leaders and a culture to go along with it. Now, in our research, we found that we need to develop 3 new sets of managerial literacies, if you will, if organizations are going to really tap into the power of big data. The first one probably doesn't surprise you. They have to become data literate. They can't just view the people who manage and analyze data as somebody off to the side who does something that they don't really have to know or understand. So they have to be astute at finding, manipulating, managing, and interpreting data. The next thing they have to do is be willing and able to apply the principles of scientific experimentation.
We are here at StrataConf. We're live in Santa Clara. You've been watching the keynotes, and they're running a little bit long. We're going to cut away from the keynotes. After this short break, we'll be right back to start the CUBE programming. This is SiliconANGLE's theCUBE. Keep it right there. We'll be right back.
So you guys.
We looked at all the programs out there and identified a gap in tech news coverage. There are plenty of tech shows that provide new gadgets and talk about the latest in gaming, but those shows are just the tip of the iceberg, and we're here for the deep dive. There's a difference between technology consumers and those who live the business day to day, and our viewers recognize that. The market begged for a program to fill that void. We're not just touting off headlines. Our goal is to provide you with a story, but we also want to analyze the big picture and ask the questions that no one else is asking. Our guests aren't just here to provide commentary. We work with analysts who know the industry from the inside out. The tech business isn't new, but many networks treat it as if it is, and really barely scratch the surface on technology coverage. We follow the expansion of the cloud and the evolution of big data. We're covering new enterprise from startup to IPO and every move in between.
So what do you think was the source of this misinformation? And so you mentioned briefly there are several other... If that's the case, then why does the world need another software as a service player?
I like to think of us as a companion to theCUBE. We're here every morning trying to extract the signal from the noise. Where theCUBE excels in event coverage, we're working to bring that experience to you consistently every morning. We use the top stories of the day to provide you with breaking analysis so that you can forecast future trends. We're here before you even wake up. We're creating a fundamental change in news coverage, laying the foundation and setting the standard. And this is just the beginning.
theCUBE is this conceptual box, if you will, and we bring people inside of theCUBE and then we share ideas, but those ideas don't stay inside theCUBE. We explode that idea. We allow that idea to grow, and it does. So we really try to own the whole enterprise technology space. I mean, that's what we're all about. We take analysis, we take publishing, we take news, and we take live TV, and we combine it together in a product and share that with our community.
no one's doing what we're doing. What we're doing, in my opinion, is the future of media, future of television, future of the internet. Video is an amazing, powerful product.
So we work in what John and I talk about as a data model. People always say to us, well, how do you guys make money? We sell knowledge, we sell information, we sell data.
So the problem that we identified is about what we call big, fast, total data. Anybody can analyze a gigabyte of data. If you do 1,000 gigabytes, that's a terabyte of data. You take 1,000 terabytes, that's a petabyte of data. 1,000 petabytes, that is zettabyte of data. So you are talking big data, lots and lots of data, and can you analyze it in real time as it comes in, right?
The Cube is like we call ESPN of tech, because we want to cover technology like ESPN covers sports.
John has a great vision for what's going to happen next in tech. And so John is sort of that alter ego of mine that lets me see the future.
We have a really amazing team of people that work with us.
Michael Sean Wright, Mark Hopkins, we've got Kim here today. We've got a team of people on our news desk run by Kristen Nicole. So she has a team that helps feed us the news of the day, what's happening, the analysis. We have a team of analysts, and they feed us information about what's happening. And then, really importantly, we have a community, a big community of many hundreds of contributors.
We love technology, we love the innovation, and that's what we do. We want to create a great user experience. And in order to do that properly, you've got to really, really prepare. The Cube, for the past year that we've been in operation, has been very, very successful. And companies do pay us to come here. I think that companies who bring us in with the Cube get two things. They get a third-party independent resource to provide knowledge to their audience who are seeking it. There's demand for the product. And also complements their existing media. We're here at an event, and the company has their own TV organization, and they have to pay a premium for that. So we complement that by offering a objective, organic, third-party, independent analysis of the event. That's why the top executives come in here.